welcome Sara Rogers, Development Coordinator, and Max Iannone, Planning Technician 1, both of Legislative Approval, Staging of Development. Before we get started, just a couple of min items. Please ensure your microphones are muted, and this Lunch and Learn will be recorded to share with new staff and staff that could not attend today. And so there will be a question and answer period at the end of the presentation where you will be welcome to unmute yourself, raise your hand, and we will call upon you to ask your question to our presenters. So addressing is a little more than knowing that even numbers are on one side of the street and odd numbers are on the other when you're driving down or waiting for your pizza guy to come deliver your pizza. With the city's projected population to grow another 250,000 by 2051, with ADUs, complicated industrial and condominium subdivisions, addressing has become very complicated. Therefore, we thought it was time to entrench and improve our addressing strategy within a bylaw, and that's what Sara and Max have been working on this past year with the oversight of our great manager, Heather Travis. With that, I just want to turn it over to Max to start us off. Max?
Thank you, George, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Max Iannone, and I'm an addressing technician with the Legislative Approvals and Staging of Development section. And today we're excited to introduce you to Addressing 101, How to Address the City of Hamilton, Fortifying an Addressing Strategy for the City. And to start, let's consider a simple question. Why does addressing matter? And like George said, while it may just seem like some numbers on buildings and names on street, accurate addressing is foundational to a well-functioning city. It impacts everything from emergency response times and property management to infrastructure planning and community development. And the purpose of today's presentation is to share our proposed Municipal Addressing By-law, a new approach to ensure consistent, clear, and effective addressing across Hamilton. This bylaw is not just about assigning numbers, it's about supporting public safety, improving navigation, and creating a foundation for the city's future growth. Throughout this presentation, we'll cover why this bylaw is needed, how it will work, and the steps we'll take to implement it. And we'll also explain how this bylaw ties into initiatives like Next Generation 911 to enhance emergency response capabilities. So thank you again for being here, and we'll have time at the end, hopefully, where we can encourage you to ask questions. Let's begin with our agenda for today. We will start by discussing the importance of addressing, why having a standardized, accurate addressing system is critical for city planning, emergency services, and community development. And then next we'll look at policies and guidelines that shape our approach to municipal addressing, providing a framework for how addresses are assigned, maintained, and updated. From there, we'll move into the new address request and change of address request process, covering how residents and businesses can apply for a new address or request changes to existing ones. And then we'll also highlight the Farm 911 Emergency Access Program, which is an initiative that improves emergency access in rural areas through clearly visible number signs. And following that, Sara will speak to the upcoming Municipal Addressing By-law, what it entails, how it will be implemented, and the benefits it will bring to our city. And finally, we'll wrap up with a look at an interesting and challenging addressing situation, a unique case that demonstrates some of the complexity and importance of thoughtful addressing. So with that, let's dive into why municipal addressing matters. A well-organized and accurate addressing system impacts multiple facets of our daily lives and city operations. Firstly, for emergency services, accurate addressing and accurate addresses are crucial. When first responders can locate an address without delay, it can literally be the difference between life and death in urgent situations. Properly managed addressing helps emergency responders reach people faster. And one of the first questions we ask ourselves when assigning a new address or changing an existing address is whether it will serve to better inform our emergency services. Property assessments and organizations like MPAC rely on correct addresses for tax assessment purposes and accurate property value tracking, which ultimately impacts funding and city budgeting. Building permits and water permits are also dependent on addressing. When new developments are planned or modifications to properties are made, permits are tied to addresses, ensuring compliance with city codes and regulations. Then there's mail. Accurate addressing is vital for efficient mail delivery, helping prevent delays and misdelivery, especially in high-density areas. Telecoms and utilities such as electricity, gas, and water services rely on addressing to manage connections and billing accuracy. Simply, clear and consistent addresses help residents, visitors, delivery services. It helps them find their way efficiently around the city. And most importantly, we need to make sure that the pizza guy knows where to deliver the goods. Proper addressing reduces confusion, makes navigation simpler. Municipal addressing impacts a wide range of services and is foundational to a well-functioning city. Now, let's go over the key responsibilities of our municipal addressing team, who play a crucial role in maintaining and managing the city's addressing system. The city is responsible for the municipal addressing of all structures and properties in our city. A number assigned by the Planning and Economic Development Department, that's us, is considered the official municipal number regardless of any other number assigned by any other outside agency or city department. Whether it's a new development or resident requesting an address change, our team is responsible. Once an address is assigned, we update our addressing information management system known as Address Manager. This is our central database where all address information is stored and maintained, keeping records up to date and accessible for various departments and services. Another essential responsibility is assigning street names. Our team works to ensure that new street names are chosen carefully, following our council-approved policies. When a municipal address is assigned, we will issue an official address notification letter. These official communications notify property owners of address assignments or changes and provide formal approval for new street names, ensuring everyone that is affected is informed. And our team also provides formal addressing comments and conditions for development applications. We collaborate closely with applicants to ensure that all new developments meet our addressing requirements, which is needed for permits and inspections later down the line. And when it comes to actually choosing the municipal address to be assigned, how do we choose what numbers, what spacing, what pattern, ascending or descending? Well, we have three main policies or procedures when it comes to municipal addressing. A general municipal addressing policy regarding the assignment of numbers, a new development policy for site plans, subdivisions, and condominiums, and a newly adopted policy for assigning Farm 911 numbers to vacant rural lands. And I'll now go over at like a high level some of our general policies. So King Street and James Street is the starting point for municipal addressing of arterial and collector roads, meaning that the assigned numbers will ascend starting at King and James. This is also the foundation of the directional suffixes of street names like Main Street East and West, and John Street North and South. In other areas of the city, addressing of local streets starts from arterial, collector, or the closest major road where available, or where possible. And houses on the right side of the street are assigned even numbers, typically beginning with 4. And the left side of the street shall be assigned odd numbers, typically beginning with 3. A default space for numbering shall be incrementing odd or even numbers for every 6 meters of frontage. So like 4, 6, 8, or 3, 5, 7. However, an area with an established numbering pattern shall continue to use that numbering pattern. For cul-de-sacs, we address starting with the lowest numbers at the intersection, with the numbers meeting at the end of the cul-de-sac, at the end of that street. And municipal numbers are based on the architectural frontage of the building where the principal entrance is located, provided that there is a connection from the street to the building. Where the building design is unknown, the municipal number is initially based off the legal lot frontage. And we do not discriminate against numbers. It's not our policy to skip numbers like 13, 44, 666. However, if an owner requests a number change and goes through the required process, we can change the number if there's a whole number available. Let's take a closer look at our approach to numbering different types of residential dwellings. We have specific guidelines to ensure consistent addressing across single-family homes, semi-detached dwellings, and townhomes. First, for single-family dwellings, addresses will be assigned in increments of 4. This method allows for future growth and helps maintain a logical flow of numbering along residential streets. Next, for semi-detached dwellings, each individual unit within a building will be numbered in increments of 2. In cases of an infill development where the availability of whole numbers is limited, we can use an alphabetical suffix like A and B if needed. For street townhomes, we use a similar strategy. Each unit will also be numbered by increments of 2, with an interval of 2 numbers between townhouse buildings, if required to keep numbering in sequence with each other across the street. Lastly, stacked townhomes are handled slightly differently. Each individual dwelling in a stacked townhouse complex will be numbered consecutively based on the location of its main entrance or driveway frontage. This approach ensures that each unit is clearly identified according to its unique access point. These structured numbering systems are designed to support easy navigation, efficient service delivery, and logical growth across various types of residential housing. I spoke previously about the site plan process and municipal addressing conditions. And our site plan conditions ensure that new developments adhere to our addressing policies. For multi-story developments, we typically require applicants to submit a unit number list and floor plan showing the unit number of each unit within the building. We will also issue conditions if the applicant has proposed commercial units and it appears that the applicant wants the commercial units to have separate addresses or unit numbers allotted to them. We also request a condition if the applicant has indicated that private road names will be required. The condition states that the owner will work to finalize municipal addressing and street naming with our section, legislative approvals. And another important aspect of municipal addressing of new developments are multi-unit identification signs. MUI signs, for short, are meant to be used for block townhouse developments and for commercial, industrial, or institutional developments that will contain 3 or more buildings, where all buildings will require a separate municipal address. The main purpose of the MUI sign is to aid in locating multiple buildings or features in the name of public safety. As part of the standard site plan conditions, these MUI signs are to be built prior to occupancy. And here are a few examples of some recently approved MUI sign concept plans. Last year, we adopted specifications which note the mandatory features, elements, and design required for the sign. So we require unit numbers to be labeled on buildings, fire route, fire hydrants, a north arrow, you are here sign, those typical map features. And an MUI sign is required to be installed on the right side of each entrance driveway to the site, oriented parallel with the public roadway so that it is clearly visible from the street. I've spoken about how we choose a municipal address, but when do we assign a new address? There are 5 main events that trigger the need for a new municipal address or address change. A subdivision, number 1, is where lots are created and need to be assigned an address, and street names may also need to be assigned, which we will get to. Number 2 is a site plan application. New homes, townhomes, common element condominiums, commercial developments. These developments require addresses. Number 3 is where a new parcel is created through the Committee of Adjustment by way of a consent to sever land application. Newly created parcels, especially those that we'll see new residential development require an address. Number 4 is additional dwelling units, which is where we have seen an increase in address requests lately, whether it be internal units added to the basement of an existing home or detached additional dwelling units added to the rear yard of a property. ADUs require an address. And lastly, a new address request could come from any internal or external agency or individual. For example, parks and cemeteries may want an address to be assigned for a new amenity. A need for an address may come from a telecom company building a cell tower, or simply a residential owner may want to change the existing address of their home. And like I said, with the consent of the owner, anyone may submit for an address change or new address. On the right is an example of our address request form, which we will collect from applicants and use to review and determine the appropriate municipal address to assign. Once we've made that determination, we will issue an official address letter, finalizing the new municipal address. The official address letter is circulated to several internal and external agencies, including MPAC, Canada Post, Emergency Services, Waste Collection, etc. And aside from an address request from an individual owner, we will only process an official address letter once a final site plan approval is granted, a subdivision registration is achieved, a building permit is made final or closed in cases of like ADUs, or notification that the final certificate from the Committee of Adjustment has been issued, finalizing a severance. If a new subdivision or condominium propose new streets, we will conduct a street name review for existing adjacent streets because, for example, we may want to extend an existing street name through a new subdivision. In cases where a new street name is required, a list of reserved street names is provided to subdivision developers. These names have been pre-approved and typically have a reference to people, groups, places, native flora, fauna, and geographical features. We're always accepting new names to be added to the pre-approved list. Developers will choose names from the existing reserved list, or they may suggest their own names, which will be subject to review. Once the developer and staff have agreed upon the street name, a street name approval letter is issued. And much like an official address letter, we circulate both of these letters to relevant agencies and stakeholders. And we collect 3 different types of alternate street names as well: alias, historic, and commemorative names. Street name aliases are names stored in our database that are not officially recognized, but may be visible on a sign or are names used in the community. For example, numbered routes like Hamilton 8 on the right, as you can see, is considered an alias. You may recognize these numbered routes by the blue shield signage along all these routes in the field. And this is not to be confused with the regional road numbering system, which nearly ceased to exist at the time of amalgamation, outside of 2 examples that I know of, which are Regional Road 20 and Regional Road 56. Other regional road names are actually still legitimate, as no official bylaw was ever passed to abolish these old names. Thus, the reason why they're considered an alias. Historic names are a little less confusing, as they simply refer to a previously assigned street name. And commemorative names are those that you may have seen, such as Bernie Filoni Way near Tim Hortons Field, or Pat Quinn Way and Veterans Way. A commemorative street name can be suggested by any member of the public or a councillor. They do not replace the existing street name, will not appear on any City of Hamilton mapping, and no municipal addresses will be assigned to the commemorative name. And looking at a great example of Coots Drive in Dundas, we have on record, obviously Coots Drive is the official street name, and we have Hamilton 8 and Regional Road number 341 as alias names. And we have highway number 8D and highway number 102 as historic names, and Veterans Memorial Parkway as the commemorative street name. And in January of this year, we launched a new initiative called the Farm 911 Emergency Access Program. The Farm 911 project assigns a unique number to vacant parcels of farmland that don't have a municipal address, helping emergency responders identify these properties more quickly and improving response times during critical situations. The project, also known as the Emily Project, is inspired by a tragic incident involving young Emily Trudeau on a family farm in Ontario. Emily's unfortunate passing was a result of her injuries on a farm property that did not have a municipal address. It made it challenging for emergency responders to locate her quickly. Sometimes these access points to rural properties are simply a path over a small culvert or a hidden driveway between trees. So we, along with police, fire, and paramedics, are strongly encouraging farm owners to enroll in the program. Those who enroll will receive a red and white address sign installed prominently at the existing access point, making it easier for emergency services to locate the property quickly. And the signs and installation are free to the owner. When you call 911 from your home phone or your cell phone, the telecommunications network connects you to the nearest 911 call center, and your location information is provided to emergency responders. This ensures that they can find you and provide assistance as quickly as possible. The call center then dispatches the appropriate emergency responders. Next Generation 911, is also known as NG 911, is an advanced emergency communication system being rolled out across Canada and other countries. Unlike traditional 911 systems, NG 911 is designed to handle not only voice calls, but also text messages, images, videos, and real-time location information like GPS. This enhanced capability allows emergency responders to receive more detailed information about incidents, improving their ability to respond quickly and effectively. Telecommunication experts, dispatchers, will be better able to use City of Hamilton location data to route first responders. So the upcoming Municipal Addressing By-law is essential in supporting NG 911 because accurate, standardized addressing is critical for emergency response. For NG 911 to work effectively, emergency responders need precise location data to pinpoint where help is needed. The bylaw will help ensure that every address in the city is clearly defined and accurately represented in the addressing database. This will reduce the chances of miscommunications or delays during emergencies. In short, as the City of Hamilton transitions to support NG 911, the new addressing bylaw will play a key role in enabling accurate and efficient emergency response, ultimately enhancing public safety for our community. Now I will pass it over to Sara to speak more to our upcoming Municipal Addressing By-law.
Great. Thank you, Max, for sharing the importance of addressing and walking us through our existing policies and guidelines. Now I'd like to unpack some of the changes to our existing policies and procedures that will come with our Municipal Addressing and Street Naming Bylaw. Let's start with the changes that will be introduced to our current addressing practice. So firstly, unit numbering criteria will be introduced. So far, staff has been using a best practice approach in our review and approval of unit numbering schemes, but there is no unit numbering criteria within the council-approved addressing policy, the existing policy. So, for example, one of the criteria is, of course, that the unit number relates to the level or floor that the unit is on. So that's the 101, 102, 201, 202, like that. And then for something else like stacked townhouse dwellings, where each unit has direct access from the exterior of the building, we generally number the units consecutively, beginning with 1, as Max noted earlier. And if you can take a look at the floor plans, I'm not sure how large your screens are, but the one on the left here is the level 1 floor plan. And this is actually units 1, 3, and 6. And then over here on the second floor, on the right-hand side, we've got 2, 4, and 5. So it's just shows that it's a little bit tricky, but they are numbered consecutively as you move across the facade from door to door there. So second requirement is to obtain unit numbers prior to the construction of a building with units, or prior to creating new units in an existing building. For example, like with the additional dwelling units, that these will be, this requirement is going to be introduced with the bylaw. So currently there is no requirement to obtain unit numbers from the city. And we actually generally get requests for unit numbers when the owner attempts to set up the services for the unit, because the official city issued unit numbering is required by services such as Canada Post for, say, community mailbox slots, and other services as well require the official addressing and unit numbering. And this can lead to issues such as units existing on the ground that aren't in our address manager software, and therefore emergency response is actually unaware of the locations of those units. Thirdly, the power to change an existing address will be introduced. And this is significant because currently we can only recommend an address change to a property owner. And then that property owner would need to submit the request for their address change to us, the completed form and the fee requesting the change. And unfortunately, there have been times when staff or the public has raised concern about an address in their area, but the property owner fails to acknowledge even our recommendations. And so unfortunately, the addressing is left a bit confusing for those situations. So with the bylaw in place, staff will actually be able to change a person's address without receiving a request from them. And that would be for public safety reasons. So there are a few changes in store for the city's private road naming practices as well. The bylaw will build on our current practice, which is that the private road name is suggested by the owner developer and reviewed and approved by staff, or alternatively, they could select a name from our pre-approved street name list. And legislative approval staff would issue the street name approval letter to the owner or developer. And then the street name would be added to our street name index. That's in a Microsoft Access file currently. And then the private road name wouldn't be finalized until the time of final site plan approval, and that's when the official address notification letter is provided and the address manager is updated with the private road name and the new addresses assigned. However, with the bylaw, once a name has been reviewed and approved by staff, we'll issue that street name approval letter. But then in order to finalize it, the private road naming will actually need to be finalized through adoption and registration of a bylaw to name the private road. This is required by the Municipal Act, including public notice of intention to pass the bylaw. However, it has not been part of our past practice. So moving forward, once we begin to follow this new practice, it means that where a private road name bylaw has been passed, the city will have the authority granted through the Municipal Act to enter onto that private property and install private road name signage if required, and charge the owner for the costs of completing those works ourselves. So introducing address signage requirements, there's currently no citywide bylaw or council approved policy that requires address number signs to be affixed to buildings or on signs. And our current practice is that through the site plan approval process, staff would require address signage statements on the site plan letter of undertaking, such that the owner agrees to affix the municipal address to the building or on a sign, such that it is visible from the street. So with the bylaw, we're introducing some address signage requirements. So for one, the municipal address of each building would have to be affixed to it. And secondly, should the address not be visible from the road due to the location of the building on the property, an address sign will also be required on the property to ensure, excuse me. Excuse me, sorry. To ensure visibility of the address from the street. And then thirdly, where a building is under construction, A temporary address sign must be posted, which would be the actual municipal address and not the lot number. And it would display the address such that it is visible from the street until construction is complete and the permanent address signage can be installed. And then lastly, all the buildings in the rural area will still be required to have the green and white address sign on the property near the road. That's in accordance with the Rural Signage Program bylaw. So the purpose of that bylaw was to require the property identification sign, those are the green and white signs, to be installed in accordance with the provisions of that bylaw on all those lots that contain a building in the rural area. However, this bylaw was going to be repealed in its entirety, but it'll be carried forward and incorporated into our municipal addressing bylaw. We would also update our site plan letter of undertaking statements to reference the new municipal addressing and street naming bylaw. So continuing on with some address signage requirements here. For residential buildings on a corner lot, it will actually be prohibited to display the address on the facade facing the street that the building is not addressed from, unless the street name is also provided. So you can see on the left-hand side here an example of what that might look like as far as signage goes. Unit numbers will be required to be affixed to the building near the entrance of each unit for all units with direct access from the street. So we're thinking in these cases townhouse complex, but even also commercial and industrial units. And then further, an additional requirement for those duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes is that the building address must be displayed with the unit number. So it would look like address dash unit number, and that we can see that on the right-hand side of the slide, an example of that. And then we would just note that the upcoming signage requirements are going to apply to existing buildings as well. And so there won't be any grandfathering of these requirements for existing buildings that do not comply. So our council adopted street naming policy does not contain any signage requirements as far as sign specifications like the size of the sign, the letter height, where the signs are to be located, street name signs. And the bylaw considers 3 different types of street name signs. So those are the public street names, commemorative street names, and private street names. So for public road name signs, there aren't any requirements in our bylaw for the sign design or location or anything like that, and Public Works will continue to be responsible for the fabrication, location, and the installation of those public road name signs, and also for commemorative street name signs. There are, however, a few requirements for the commemorative street name signs contained within the bylaw. So, and that is that they shall have a different appearance from both the public and private street name signs, and that the word commemorative must be displayed on the sign in smaller lettering. Private road name signs, again, the requirements are a mirror to the commemorative street name signs, so they shall have a different appearance from both the public and commemorative street name signs, and the word private is to appear on the sign in smaller lettering in brackets there. However, the owner of the property will continue to be responsible for the fabrication installation of the private road name signs. We do intend to include a sign detail specifically for private road name signs within our street naming policy, just to, more to assist the development community, but also to regulate the appearance of those signs. So you might wonder why we would even need to introduce signage requirements in the bylaw. Well, obviously it's specifically for public safety and wayfinding, and we're moving forward with the bylaw to require that addressing follows specific rules or standards in order to improve public safety and wayfinding, and that owners obtain their addresses and unit numbers, but it doesn't go very far if we don't also require them to be posted and visible. So we need that piece there as well to work in tandem. And then we would also note that as far as the temporary signage goes, the requirements for the temporary address signage, that workers have a right to safety too, and that the permanent signage is required prior to occupancy, but when a building is under construction, there are workers on site, and their safety is important too. And so it's important that EMS can navigate to where they need to go should anything happen. And the powers of enforcement will also be introduced through the Municipal Addressing By-law. Through discussions with MLE, Municipal Law Enforcement, they will be providing the enforcement for the bylaw. And they've noted that education will be their starting point prior to any enforcement action. And in fact, the bylaw will not take effect on the day that it's adopted, but rather there will be a delay to provide time for those who may need to bring their property into compliance. And there's also that window to begin with the education pieces and whatnot. So the powers that are introduced are the entry and inspection, which is necessary to determine when and where a contravention has occurred. And as well, the administrative penalties bylaw is proposed to be amended to include contraventions to the bylaw so that tickets for contraventions can be issued. The power to issue an order to comply, including a prohibition orders, will also be introduced. Offenses under Part 3 of the Provincial Offences Act could be served, for example, to a person who has failed to comply with an order. Further, where a person has failed to comply with an order, the city could do the required works to bring the property into compliance and then charge the cost back to the owner. So as you can see, there's a variety of enforcement options that'll be introduced. The prohibition order may be useful, for example, in a situation where a property owner has affixed the wrong address to their building, but they're unwilling to correct the signage. So if the city were to enter onto the property to complete the works ourselves, it might be necessary to go that one step further and actually prohibit the owner from putting the wrong address back up again on the building. So we just wanted to share with you an example of sort of a challenging addressing situation. And this came up about a year and a half ago. So at this property here is 11 Main Road. It's at the corner of Main Road and Side Street, and at the intersection there. So there's two number 11 signs that are displayed on this dwelling. One is facing the Main Road street, and then the other is facing this side street there. So staff received complaints from the property owner over here at 11 Side Street of their packages and bills mistakenly being delivered to the house on the corner here. So staff responded by sending a letter to the property owner here at 11 Main Road requesting that they replace the sign on the facade that faces Side Street with one that says 11 Main Road. And we even offered compensation for replacing the sign. We sent 2 letters. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten any response. And so that situation remains confusing and frustrating for the owners of 11 Side Street. So with the bylaw in place, it would give us the authority to actually require the owner of 11 Main Road to either remove that sign from their 11 that faces Side Street, or to replace it with a sign that says 11 Main Road. And so we're hoping that if a situation like this crops up, that the bylaw would be able to assist us in resolving it. Just thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, George.
Yeah, thanks, Max and Sarah, for that excellent presentation. Let's give it up for Max and Sarah with some nice emojis. Thank you again. Sarah, do you want to just stop sharing? We'll open it up to questions. Yeah, Rafiq, I'm seeing Rafiq. Do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Thanks, George and Sarah and Max. This was amazing. A couple of, not the question, but my clarification. I hear, Sarah, that the example that you gave for 11 Main Street, typically what I recall is the address should be based on the street that that property have the driveway or access from. in this case, it appeared that driveway was from the internal street, not from the main street, right? So
Yes, you're
that
absolutely right.
may be confusing. Typically, when somebody wants to find a property, they will go to the driveway, and same is with those parcel folks delivering the parcel. So that may be something. I was not too sure. How did you find the solution for that?
You're absolutely right. So without a bylaw, we don't have any recourse. We've actually engaged legal services in that one. We have no recourse to do anything in that particular situation without a bylaw. However, with a bylaw in place, so we've looked at a few different situations, and I'd have to go back and look. Of course, I changed the names of the street to be anonymous, but I'm not sure if there's actually room to have another number there. So I believe how this situation arose, as Max noted, when we're addressing a plan of subdivision, we don't know which way the house is going to face, and so that one was addressed across the frontage, which is typically where the house fronts on, right? So it was addressed according to our policies, but then when the building was built, the architectural front of the house, and as you know, the driveway is across side street. And so if we had have known that preemptively, we could have assigned the address off of side street. I'm not sure now if there's actually room to change the address, but the bylaw would, if there was room to add another number on side street, the bylaw would allow us to actually change that fellow's address for his house, which might be the better fix for that one. So I appreciate that question.
So Sarah, if the address assignment is based on when they come in for the building permit, or you assign the addresses through the subdivision approval process?
We do assign them through the subdivision approval process rather than at the building permit stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question, I was not too sure. We were talking about the permanent street signs versus temporary street signs. So is it the requirement, the Hamilton, to do the permanent at the assumption of the subdivision?
I was talking about actually just permanent versus temporary address number signs for buildings under construction, but
okay.
For temporary street name signs, that would likely be covered off through the subdivision agreement, but I'm not entirely sure. That would be something I could follow up with construction staff on that if you wanted me to get back to you on that one.
No.
Yeah, Rafiq, we can look at that and get back to you. I mean, you're close to us, so thanks for those questions, Rafiq.
Thank you.
Margaret, I'm seeing your hand up.
Thanks, George. I have several questions.
Okay. Okay. We only have time for about 50 or 60, but yeah, go ahead with your questions. That's great, Margaret. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a couple off the top and then a couple more after that. So how about I give you one by one? Okay. So one question is the public or our residents allowed to change the name of their street? And if so, how would they do that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, any resident may submit a address request form to our department, and we will review. And if there's a whole number available, like beside the existing number, we can totally assign a new number, and they can find our form at hamilton.ca/addressing and submit it to our maddressing@hamilton.ca email.
Sorry, did I say number? I meant to ask street.
Oh, street name?
Can
they
they
want to
change
change their
their
street name?
Yeah, street name.
Yes, they
Like
can change their...
I want to name my street Margaret Fazio Way. So would I be able to do that?
You could try. You could definitely try, but we do have a process for street renaming, but it involves 80% of the residents that abut that street to basically sign off and agree to a street name change. And then after that, then we would go through our normal street name assigning process, looking at our a pre-approved list. And if you wanted to send in a new name for review, we would, but there are some procedures for that as well.
Right. I think I've actually worked with your section on street naming for developers in AGD land, so I know that there is it's quite an evolved process. So thank you very much for that. May I go with the next question?
Sure, Margaret.
First.
So I know that you've covered that that you said if a person does not comply with the addressing, we can do it if they don't want to do it, and then they have to pay for that change in the addressing or for our doing on it. That's in the proposed bylaw. So is there another penalty, like other than cost of the fixing that we would do, is there another penalty for non-compliance, like currently or that you're proposing in the new bylaw?
I can take that one, Max. We are going to we're going to amend the administrative penalties bylaw as well. And so that would allow for fines as a way to sort of encourage compliance, I guess. If education fails to work, maybe move forward with an administrative penalty. Could also use an order to comply. We really don't anticipate the city having to do this type of work. We really are keen to have a variety of enforcement tools at the disposal of MLE to sort of encourage that compliance so that it doesn't end up in that situation. And so, yeah, so we would try to just sort of gradually step up. And if we couldn't encourage the owner to comply on their own, then that would be the time when the city may decide to do the works themselves and then charge the owner and collect it back in the same manner as taxes.
Sorry. So
Thanks,
what
Sarah.
thanks, Sarah. So what I'm hearing is that we would only be charging them what it would cost us to make the change, not extra penalties. Right. So you don't just call, don't just do the labor and the number cost, but also, $50,000 in addition to that for city to pay for all that extra work aside from that.
We are proposing to introduce like Part 3 provincial offenses fines, which can be quite hefty. So there is that option as well. I see what you're saying. It would be
yeah, I think that's still being discussed and worked out, Margaret, before the bylaw gets finalized and sent to committee and council. So, but it's a good question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Anything to make you money, my friends. Anything.
Yeah, Margaret, before we go back to you, I know you got to. Yeah, is there any other questions from anybody else? Any first-time callers? Juby, yeah. You have a question?
Yes. Hi. Thanks so much. I just had this out of curiosity. Sorry, Margaret, to interrupt your questions. There is an address, 811 King Street East. It's the Kitchen Collective, and it sits on the corner of the west side of Fairley Avenue. But on the east side, there's another building, and that building number is 811 and a half. So I was just wondering, what are the theories of how that happened, where you've got two buildings sitting across the street from each other, and it's just divided by half a number? Thank you.
So they're on either side of the street with odd numbers on both sides. That's an addressing error and something we like to fix. But once an address has been assigned historically, again, without the municipal addressing bylaw, we have no real recourse to force an owner to change their municipal address. So it does remain an issue. And in that case, we will notify 911, police, fire, emergency of that situation, of that non-conformity case. But it does still remain an existing issue for delivery and just overall wayfinding. But yes, in that case, we don't want odd numbers on either side of the street.
Thanks, Juby, for that question. Any other questions before we move it back to Margaret Fazio's cross-examination? Not seeing any. Margaret, did you want to go ahead then?
Sure, thank you. So I guess question 3 is, I recall that Burlington Street used to stretch all the way to the QEW. And then at one point, after I stopped using it for some time, I missed the exit to Burlington Street because it was renamed into Nikola Tesla Boulevard. So I wonder if any of you were part of this renaming process, and how did you decide what to name it and where to stop it and the Burlington Street began? Like what was that like? What triggered it? Do you know?
Hi,
I know
Margaret.
Sarah
No,
and Max are fairly new to their roles, so I don't know if you're aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know Sarah?
no, I wasn't.
Oh,
I wasn't
as I
around.
recall, you know how every year the province comes out with worst roads in Canada, and Burlington Street on it. Believe me, and this is the reason I think Burlington Street was always on that list as number 3, number 1, whatever. So I believe, and don't quote me on this, I believe the city thought it was time to change the name to get it off that list, because every time people looked up Burlington Street, they found that list. So they decided to change it to Nikola Tesla.
Okay,
It could be a made-up presentation answer, but I'm fairly confident that's the answer.
And it
No,
does
I
change on
think
that eastbound ramp,
yeah,
just after, I think, Kenilworth,
yeah,
turns to Nikola Tesla at that point, or Ottawa, I think, Ottawa Street.
yeah.
Just after that when it turns to the ramp.
I found it weird that on the highway it didn't say former Burlington Street or anything like that. It's just Nikola Tesla. So
Yeah,
I missed it the first time.
and the obvious too, right? At Burlington Street in Hamilton, I think there was people getting confused as well, trying to find their way to the steam engine, downtown Hamilton, to the stadium, so on and so forth, where their GPS was saying, "Hey, go on Burlington Street," and tourists just new to the city were going, "Well, hold on a minute, I'm trying to find Hamilton, not Burlington." So that could be another reason why they decided to change it.
Right. So and that I have funny you should mention tourists, because that's on my other follow-up question is, I remember when we were hosting Pan Am Games, or we were one of the hosting cities for a Pan Am Games quite a few years back. There was temporary wayfinding that was assigned to the city, but it cost too much to make it into permanent wayfinding. And I wondered if in your new bylaw, if you're considering, so it's a split question, but I wonder if you're considering wayfinding for tourism purposes. So in other words, if you have street names, public and private, and then commemorative, would commemorative classify as a wayfinding for tourism purposes? So in other words, you could point there and say to Tim Hortons Field this way, just like you do in places like Paris, where you're somewhere else in the city, but you're pointing the way to major landmarks. So I don't know if that's even being considered as part of the bylaw, and would you consider adding that as one of the things that maybe new developers could put up signs when they're putting private road signs, or we could, as a city?
We weren't really considering that the tourism type signage in the bylaw, but not that there's not a place for it in the city, but I'm not sure. We weren't really sure if it belonged in the address and street naming bylaw. But that is, I have noticed that too in Europe, especially. There's those signs can be very helpful.
Certainly something. Yeah, no, I think it's certainly something to think about, Margaret. But yeah, maybe offline we can talk a bit about that as well. Again, I just want to, Rafik, I think we're just going to wrap up. So if you can save your question, maybe we can meet you at the drafting table later, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Again, I just want to thank our presenters, Sarah and Max, for all their hard work in this presentation. So kudos to you. Lots of emojis and love for you too. Thank you to Sylvia Sadowski for her ongoing assistance and help setting this up. Just want to note to everybody, this is our last Lunch and Learn, PED Lunch and Learn for 2024. But we'll see everyone at the holiday social on December 16th from 11:30 to 1:30 at the Lister Block. Looking forward to that. Lots of food and drink. And yeah, that's it. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and bye for now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.